Hello, everyone. I am so honored to be here. My name is Leah Vanderlinden, and I am an inner child and shadow worker, healer, and coach. And I couldn't think of a more perfect topic to talk about for Self Care Week than starting to really learn and understand all aspects of oneself. So, what we're going to talk about today is really diving into understanding these different aspects of who we are, how we got here, and what makes us this way. So, just sit back and dive in and just join me on this little adventure as we learn a little bit more about you. So, one of the things I think about when I think about being a child is hi, Nadine, how are you? Is that childlike innocence, that childlike joy that we used to experience, right? Before we judged things and we just did them. We didn't care who was watching us or who was looking at us, right? We just did them for the sake of, is this fun or is this not fun? Or should we do it or should we not? And then somewhere along the way, those things changed. And we started really second guessing things. Or as an adult, we got into this kind of just this autopilot form of life where the joy of life started to go away and we just started doing things for the sake of doing and being for the sake of being, but we stopped experiencing, right? How often in your life do you just feel like you just literally live the same day over and over and over, and you don't remember the last time you experienced pure joy, that pure childlike magic? So what I want to talk to you about today is understanding why that may be happening and giving you some little tips on how you can get there. Okay. So when I think of the inner child, the easiest way to explain this, and as you guys are hopping on and joining me, I love to be interactive. So are you guys familiar with that term, inner child work? Go ahead and write yes or no in the comments, and that just lets me know how to explain this a little bit better or where to kind of dive into and where to steer away from. So as I'm waiting on those comments to pop in or pop on, what I like to refer to the inner child as is this part of our mind that tends to store all of our emotional experiences as a child. So when I say the word child, right, psychologically, I am referencing the ages of 0 to about 7 to 7.5. When we are that age, what happens in our brain is we are going through this perfect. Okay, good. I have a yes, but not in detail, and then I have another yes. Hi, Jonathan. So when we are these ages, what happens is what's going on in our brain is we're going through this period called the egocentric period. Okay, and this is a part of growing up where everything is kind of all about you. It's all about your ego developing. So in that stage, you don't really have the state of consciousness to be aware that these people that are caring for you or these experiences through are also attached to different things, right? All you see through from that age are your eyes and, oh my gosh, like if it's not happening a certain way, it's about me. I did something wrong. I'm not worthy. I'm not accepted. It's all about you in those moments from that age period. Does that make sense? And then when you start to rise out of that age period and you start to dive in more towards 8 and you get a little bit older, okay, you don't take things as personal. However, your processing for the last 7 to 8 years of your life, you did. So you now, therefore, see everything from those eyes. You guys follow me? Okay, so tell me slow down if I start going a little crazy, because this is my passion and I could talk about this subject all day and every day. So write in the comments if that makes sense and you're following along. Hi, Mary, how are you? So from that point forward, then, as you get a little bit older and you become an adult, you start to see everything from that same lens, from that same point of view, okay? And where that becomes an issue is as you become an adult, you start to have these reactions and responses to things that seem relatively small to most people, but to you, they become this huge deal. Okay. Like you come home and your partner didn't take out the trash, or you come home and there are dishes piled up in the sink. And now you find yourself about to, you're like, oh my God, why don't they understand and appreciate me? I've had such a long day and all I want to do is just come home and relax. I'm so sick of this, right? So it's a small thing, but it becomes this big thing that then all of a sudden gets linked to the meaning and definition of, wow, why am I not seen? Why am I not loved enough or respected enough for somebody to do the damn dishes, right? These little things become big things. So if you zoom out and then you started to really look back at what made you so triggered, it might be that when you were little, the favorite part of your day used to be sitting there, right? And waiting for your dad to get home and being so excited, like, Dad's coming home. Hey, can't wait to see my dad. And then your dad gets home and you being in that egocentric stage, right? Exactly, Nadine. You being in that stage, you think, he's going to be so excited to see me too. And we're going to play Uno and skip out, right? Because it's all about you. And then in that age, and then he gets home, but you don't know or even can't even comprehend as a kid that he's had a horrible day. And he also is really stressed. So he gets home and the last thing he feels like doing is interacting with a child. But you take that as rejection because you are in that egocentric state. You take that as a personal attack of, why am I not enough? Why doesn't my dad just want to spend time with me? Then you fast forward 20 years from there and you are now in an adult situation, right? And then those dishes reemerge, or your partner gets home and your partner's not excited to see you, and you start to take that wrong and you start to react and you start to respond, right? Nadine said, that was me. I wanted to tell him everything and I watched for the clock sitting by the stairs, couldn't wait for him to get home. Yeah, right? And so then what happens is, let's say you have that same childlike joy, you're super excited for your partner to get home, and then your partner has had a really rough day and your partner doesn't interact with you the way that you were hoping. And then you don't understand why now all of a sudden you're yelling at your partner, or you've shut down and you become closed and you become almost numb to them, right? That's where this inner child knowledge, it becomes so important because it continues to follow you as an adult when these seemingly small things happen and they become really big in your relationship or preventing you from furthering yourself in your career or your self-growth or your self-love and self-care. So it's really important that you begin to understand that these are parts of yourself that are crying out for you to learn about them. They're not parts of you that you should be ashamed of. They're not parts of you that should be looked down on with this fear of, oh my gosh, I don't want to relive that trauma. Because in many situations, it's not necessary. You have to understand that when you were a little kid, you were seeing things from, like I said, an egocentric point of view. It was all about you. But now as an adult, you might not necessarily see it through that same point of view. So it doesn't look like trauma to you now. But as a kid, it was super traumatic to you. So much so, it became your response system when you feel that some part of you is in that same situation. And it can be preventing you from experiencing real joy now. This is why it's so important when you're doing parts of your self-care journey that we begin to learn these parts of ourselves. Hi, oh, look at all these people popping on. Hi, Lotus. So good to see you. So what we learn in inner child work and what I teach my clients and what you're going to learn about a little bit about today is that from that point forward of this trauma situation that happened to you, you now alter the way you see everything. So what I tell my clients is that you start to almost wear these contacts that are the wrong prescription, okay? So you see everything through these lenses of this child. And then you get older and you continue to have this wrong prescription. So we're going to do some little activities to change that prescription. Everybody following here? Can you think of something in your life that is small, that may seem relatively small now, zooming out, that you overreacted? Go ahead and leave it in the comments, because it's crazy when you think about it, like, why on earth did I overreact to that? And then you zoom out and you go, oh crap, now I know why. So anyways, but most of the time when this tends to come out the most for you is going to be in relationships, right? It's going to be in relationships, because relationships tend to stimulate a lot of what our family did for us. Most of the time, you never get in a close situation to another individual like you do with your family. It's because you live with them. So this is the place where you lay your hat. This is the place where you cry, where you let everything go. And so it's a lot of times what happens is you get triggered by your partner without realizing it, like you did your family, because in many ways you're kind of in that same situation again. You're living with them, so it brings out a lot of that stuff that you might not have dealt with. Nadine is writing tips in here. So she said, number 1, be aware that when you are triggered, this could be because new experiences mirror hurtful experiences in your childhood. 100%. So another thing is that a lot of times you're living with these same fears that are coming up, that you're not really understanding where they come from. And they've created habits that you are doing things every day without even realizing why you're doing it. And this is a lot of times because you are still having this inner child rule your life. So here's one. So my mom is terrified to drive. She's terrified to drive. And when she was in traffic, her body would stiff up like this, right? And she would hold the steering wheel super tight, and everything in her would change. She wouldn't really want to talk when she was driving. She was scared because of an experience she had. And then as an adult, this actually carried on to me. I didn't learn how to drive until I was 21 years old. And I only learned how to drive because I became a mom and I knew I'd have to take him places, right? But this same fear, without realizing it, it came into me. And then as an adult, I would start shaking behind the wheel, or I'd be quiet when I was driving, or I would not even go to things because I didn't want to drive. Okay? So there are times that you're also living your own fears based on these inner child fears that were passed on to you from your parents. This is why this can even reflect how you raise your kids. If you don't deal with your inner child issues, right, or the things that are holding you back, you will pass those on to your kids, and those will be issues they'll need to deal with their inner child. So same with like a dirty house. A dirty house was a huge trigger for my father, and I used to find that when my son would go and leave something behind, I would get really upset and I would yell. And that's because my dad passed it on without realizing it. When he was a child, it was, certain things like that were not necessarily allowed for him, and also with his military background. See how this is all making sense now? So it carries on to you in so many aspects. So, yeah. Nadine said, if we can't remember, she's asked a question. If we can't remember what the childhood experience is, can we still deal with the issue? Most certainly. So what I like to teach my clients, and in my courses too, is that when you are triggered, the trigger is actually a teacher, because it's affecting you, right? Because it holds a deeper meaning. So if you go into a grocery store and you feel like, and the person is not being very friendly to you, that's waiting on you, and they're not acknowledging you, they're not talking to you, and you feel your chest start to tighten, and you feel you're sweating, and you're frustrated, and your blood's starting to boil, and the longer you stand there, the more and more upset you get, right? There's a deeper meaning than this. And what oftentimes is happening is that you're triggered from a point when you didn't feel seen, you didn't feel heard or acknowledged. And without realizing it, your inner child is starting to kind of rebel and throw a fit. Like, excuse me, do you know who I am? Let me tell you about who I am, sister. right? So your inner child is wanting to respond. So even if you feel like you can't remember the experience, one of the best things that you can do is ask yourself, when you get to a place that you can really ask yourself, where is this really coming from? Am I not feeling seen? Am I not feeling heard? And if you want to dig deeper, then you can get out your pen and paper and ask yourself, when was the last time, or when is the first time I remember that I was not seen? And that can almost take your breath away thinking about that. And if you go back to that experience and there is still a ton of emotion and you feel yourself starting to cry and you feel yourself really deeply affected by that, hello, baby girl. Hello, baby boy. That's your answer. That moment that's causing you all that emotional stuff to be brought back up, that's where you're still stuck, 100%. And you will continue to attract people and events that mirror that for you, that upset you and frustrate you until you get to the core of it. You cannot move on no matter what amazing program you buy, no matter what phenomenal book, no matter how many times you go and see Tony Robbins, honey, until you deal with the root of the root. You've got to really deal with the root issue of what's causing these responses. If not, you're going to continue to do things to numb it, but you're always going to go back to this feeling and these people and these environments until you fix it. Mary said, oh my God, this is so me. Yes, it's so many of us. It's so many of us. So many of us are adults still operating like a child. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the beauty is when you become an adult, you become aware. And this is where the real beauty of self-care lies, is bringing awareness to the situation, which we'll get into a little bit, in a little bit. Jonathan said those early years of the nurtured environment shape and mold the filters of the mind, our concept of right and wrong and foundation of one's moral compass. 100%. 100,000%. Yes, Lotus said, just like me, when I didn't feel like anyone cared about me, I figured it was coming from my childhood. It was 100% with you too. Mary said, if we know what it is and we get to the core, how do we fix it? Girl, I'm going to get into that, honey. I'm going to get into that. Nadine said, number 2, I love that she's doing these bullet points. That helps me out. So she said, number 2, if you feel triggered, even without knowing the original cause, you can still recognize the emotion and explore it. For example, when was the last time I felt angry because I wasn't heard? Yes. Or when was the first time? Because if you can go back to when the first time was, chances are, which is crazy, it's when you were a kid. It's when you were a kid. So, anyways, what I want to talk about is how we can break from assigning things these meanings and making these things these huge deals that are not such huge deals, that are preventing us from really being able to experience that childlike joy and from being able to just have this life that we love. Okay, so one of the biggest ways is really examining our coping mechanisms. What is it that we do when we need to cope? And most of the time, what is it that we're trying to cope from? If you find that it's a repetitive thing, that you just don't feel enough, you just don't feel seen or heard or loved or supported or worthy, this is a huge thing, okay? So chances are that when you don't feel this way, you have the same coping mechanism. It may be that you run. It may be that you run to the kitchen and binge eat. It may be that you excessively work out. You call someone and you seek validation, or you find yourself flirting or dating to fill the void so you do feel wanted and seen. Really examine your coping mechanisms. What is it that you do in these moments? Because these moments become years, and these years become patterns that become your life. Okay? So examine that. Examine where that's coming from too. So I also wanted to talk about, or what I want to talk about too, is that the beauty is, as an adult, you can make a choice, and you can make the choice to be in control. And how, and what I mean by that is that you can reparent yourself. Okay. So if it was that when you were younger, you really wanted someone to show up for you. You were like phenomenal at sports. You were a rock star on the stage, but every time you looked out, you never saw your parents. You never saw anyone from your family cheering you on, okay? Then what you can do now is reparent that child so that when you have these moments in your life that are these big moments where you get the job promotion or you land the date with that super hot person you've wanted forever, you secretly or you privately, you celebrate for you. You make it a moment of celebration where you cheer yourself on. You tell yourself, great job. I am so proud of you. One of the biggest moments in my life, and I'll never forget this, is I had a really hard time with loving the woman in the mirror and seeing her as beautiful, especially naked. So I looked in the mirror one day and I did not allow myself to break concentration with my eyes. And I continued to look at me. And I can't explain to you how emotional that was, but it's very rare that we actually look at ourselves and engage with ourselves. So as I did that, I said to her, Leah, you are so beautiful. Leah, you are amazing. And I started telling her all these things that I longed to hear. And it was one of the most powerful moments of existence for me. And I just didn't break concentration. I just stayed in that moment. And all these words started pouring out of me of things I longed to hear. So I challenge you to grab a mirror, look in the mirror, and start telling yourself those things you didn't hear. Reparent you. One of the most beautiful things that I also do for my clients is that I sit with them and I give them this place where they can feel safe, okay? And as they do that, I have them grab a pen and a paper. And what happens is when you start writing, a lot of times that monkey mind will shut up for a moment and it lets your inner thoughts that are really the most important ones, the ones that have been lingering around the most, it allows them to come out and to come to surface and have a safe space to do that. So writing a lot to me is a lot like meditation, okay? It's allowing your mind to relieve those things and energetically giving them somewhere to go. So what I'll have my clients do is I have them start writing to whatever age they can remember that started, okay? So let's say it's 6-year-old you. So you start writing to her. And then as you write to her, you pause for a moment and you let her write back, okay? And let her just pour her words out onto the paper. Now, sometimes people have a hard time doing this, especially if they have a hard time not being in control. So what I suggest to you in that moment, and I actually learned this through Carl Jung's teaching, who developed the term the inner child. So you would have your pen and paper, start writing with your dominant hand to your inner child. Sometimes it even helps if you want to give her a name, okay? So let's pretend my inner child's name is Clover. And my cute little 6-year-old Leah is Clover. So I write down Clover, dear Clover. And then I could say like, I'm sorry it's been so long since I've talked to you. I just wanted to let you know that we are now a team and I would love to learn more about you, you know, and just write to her, but try to write to her on her age level, okay? And what I want to learn the most, or what I want to learn about you right now is, what would you like to do the very most? Like if you could pick anything, what would you like to do? Okay? And then I would pause and I would put the pen in my non-dominant hand because now I really can't control the situation. And I would let Clover write back. Okay? And now I'm creating a relationship with her where she feels safe to be able to come, to express herself, and to talk. And it may even be that the first time that this side of you writes back that she just wants a brownie sundae. Give her a brownie sundae. But it may be that she gets really deep and says, I just want you to hug me and hold me. I long for a hug. Then you sit with her and you give her a hug. Okay? So this is where the reparenting begins. If it's that older parts of you were more affected, right? And teenage parts of you were more affected, it may be that you make a day where you take 16-year-old out and 16-year-old you, out to do something that she always wanted to do, and let her know that she doesn't always have to come out now only in those situations of trauma or when she doesn't feel heard or loved, that she is now going to get a day once a month where she can come out, or once a week, and be able to be whoever she never got to be. This is where she starts to feel safe, and she starts to feel that she has attention and is wanted and needed, and doesn't have to only come out and respond in those moments of weakness and being non-accepted. Nadine said, yes, examine your coping mechanisms and what keeps you coming up, what keeps coming up for you that you need to cope with. Really look and examine your patterns. Yes, she said, I love that. Reparent yourself. Yes. Nadine said, I've done work over the past year around feeling unsafe and explored how far back these feelings came from. It was so revealing. Yes. And it's crazy that when you go back and you examine those, they seemed like such big deals as a kid, right? But then when you go back and you look, you're like, now that you see it through an adult, especially almost all of us are seeing it through spiritual eyes. So you go back and now you see it like it wasn't really that big of a deal at all. And when we remove that, think of how much pressure we also remove off the people that we made, when we made ourselves the victim in many ways, and we made these other people the perpetrator. But when we go back and we see it through these different eyes, it can heal relationships that you've held on to for years, that you've held on to thinking they were toxic, right? It's just crazy when you go back and you zoom out and you see them through those eyes. Another powerful exercise that you can do is to grab a picture of you. As many pictures as you can of stages of you when you were a child. And look at these pictures and do the same exercise as the mirror, where you look at these pictures of you, okay? And just sit for a moment. You can put them on an altar. You can light a candle, make it a beautiful situation, have some music in the background, do a little meditation. Thank you, Lotus, for coming. Have a great day, sweetie. You can do a little meditation and really just ask yourself what feelings are coming up when you're looking at these child pictures, right? What is coming up when you look at 6-year-old you? What is coming up when you look at 10-year-old you? Is it non-acceptance? Is it anger? Is it happiness? What is coming up for you? And then doing a meditation around those feelings and doing forgiveness around those feelings, journaling around those feelings, cord cutting around those feelings, right? Whatever it is that's coming up. And continue to do this for like 10 minutes a day until those pictures don't activate all these emotions, because eventually those emotions will subside. When I first did that and I first had these pictures at my altar, they triggered so many things from me. But then each time I did it, I started to actually see my childhood a lot differently and see that age of me a lot differently. And then I would remove that picture and put that picture back and then focus on the ones that were still bringing something up in me. Okay. So it's just sitting with you and really learning, what is it that's coming up for me? Another fun thing to do is to have a play date with yourself where you bring out your favorite child games, right? Like Jenga, Uno, Connect Four, or baking and exploring in the kitchen, or blowing bubbles, right? Or even being, if you were never allowed to like have fun or be messy as a kid, it's also giving yourself permission to do the things you never had permission to do, right? Make a damn mess because you get to clean it up. But if you can never make a mess, then go in your bathtub and make a dang mess with like Cool Whip, or, just doing stuff you weren't ever able to do. If it's that you were never able to be loud, you always had to be quiet, then when no one's around in your house, scream or dance or talk in accents and just be goofy if you were never allowed to be that and your family was always really serious, okay? Have a play date with yourself where you just get to be a kid again. Another one is writing yourself a letter as if you were the mother or the father that you always wanted. If let's say that you always wanted a mom to have compassion, and you wanted her to be more nurturing and forgiving, and you wanted a father to be, more involved, whatever it was, write down the characteristics of what you longed for in a parent. And then you can write yourself a letter as if you are that parent, okay? And just give yourself those things. So let's say you write yourself a letter, show yourself compassion, show yourself acceptance, do those things, and write it as if you are that mom, because you can be that for you. Chances are the reason that your parents might not have been that way is because they didn't have the tools we have now. These things weren't talked about, and they weren't accepted the way that they are now. Most of our parents didn't do these things intentionally to hurt us. They were trying to survive from their own trauma. And when you are brave enough to do this healing for yourself and to do this form of self-care and self-love, you also tell your family and show your family that they can do the same. When I started doing these tools, it has been crazy how much my family has transformed, and the things that we talk about now that we're never allowed to talk about as kids. But they saw me do it and they wanted to learn how to do it too. Be the brave one to do it first. Nadine said, step number 4, reparent. This is one of the biggest things you can do for you. You can write a 2-way letter to your inner child. And this is a magical tool to create a safe space. Yes, because what's happening is your child's coming out, and it's never one child. We have a whole inner village of children in us, and they come out all the time at the most inopportune times when we're finally falling for someone or we finally got the job. That's when they come out, and it's because they're scared, because when they came out in a big moment before, they didn't receive the warm welcome that they received, that they wanted to receive. And so now every time as an adult, as you're getting ready to experience that, this inner child is trying to protect you and come out and step up and prevent you from being hurt again. Because in that moment, as that child, that caused them traumatic pain, and they don't want you to go through that again. So when you give your inner child new roles, your inner child goes, oh, hell yeah, we can step up and actually step up and have fun. We can have a slumber party, play girl talk, or prank call someone. Now we don't have to step up to protect her anymore. We can actually be a kid again. And you will see that those behaviors and coping mechanisms will start to fall and decrease one by one the more that you actually let this child have a voice. Another way is storytelling, is going back and just telling stories of your childhood in your journal and then seeing what comes up for you. But the biggest thing that I can give for you out of all the advice is to show yourself consistent effort, that you are consistently worth finding new ways to respond and to react. And asking yourself, when you respond and react, am I responding in a place of alignment, and a place of enlightenment, and a place of where I am now? Or am I responding in a place of fear, in a place of deeply seeking validation? And if the answer is B, then taking time to just breathe. If you can't do all these exercises because you're just not in that space right then, Just reciting these 3 words in your head. I am safe. I am safe. I am safe. I am safe. Before you respond, just play that over and over and over. And if that wasn't something that came up for you, one of my biggest ones is I am loved. I am loved. I am loved. I am loved. So just pick something that really resonates with you so that the next time you're in a traffic jam and someone cuts you off, this inner child doesn't jump out and want to respond. Instead, this phrase instantly comes to mind for you, and it allows you the space to breathe, and it also allows the space for your inner child to come up and go, oh wow, we really are loved, we really are safe, and we really finally have this parent and this voice that we've always longed for. Just because you might not have received the things that you craved back then doesn't mean you can't receive them now. You can give these tools to you. Find out your own ways of how you can do this. So if you guys have any questions before I go, feel free to write them in the comments below. And I would love to be able to just walk you through some ways that have really helped me and have helped my clients over the years. This is something that I always have longed for society to grasp and understand. And I think that society is learning. You know, they tend to call these parts of us the ego. They tend to call these parts of us the shadow. But at the end of the day, if you think about it and you go back and do the work, they're the child. They're the child. So, oh, good. Nadine said such great advice. Thank you so much. You are most welcome. And Mary says, I love all of this. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. So, yeah. And another thing that I would say is find someone that you feel safe talking to and having this safe place where you can go back and be able to really heal these situations. So even though I've been doing inner child work and teaching it for almost 17 years, I still do it. I still have a coach who helps me actually, she's been in here, Jen, who helps me through this. And I always continue to work on my inner child. So it's something that I just advise you to find someone that you feel safe to, where if you don't know where you're stuck, what I do for my clients is I kind of hold their hand virtually as they have this safe space to talk, and I put them in a meditative state and we walk through what's coming up for them today, literally. What are you stuck in today? And then we go back safely together, explore where that came from, and we heal that child once and for all. Now, it's not always that easy. It's not always a one step, but it is because it is a conscious effort that you have to make constantly. Oftentimes as a child, we receive the love that we wanted and needed at least a few times, but not necessarily consistently. So it's really important that if you're going to dive into doing this inner child work, that you need to be consistent. There's nothing more scary for your inner child than to start to dive in and to have her feel safe for once in her life, and then you pull it away and you stop doing the work. That is going to cause a setback in you, where now you're going to have to try even harder to make her feel safe and make her feel like she's worthy. Okay, so make sure that you're doing this work at least once or twice a week. If you're already meditating, then this week in your meditation, you do an inner child meditation. I actually put a link in here. I have some on my YouTube channel where you can just do a guided inner child meditation, where she has that safe voice in the background and safe space, and you talk to her once a week. It could be when you're in the shower and you're already having that cleansing experience and you're already having the weight of the day kind of go down the drain, that you make it a spiritual shower. And in the shower, that you ask, what parts of me really need to be seen today? And just kind of do a meditation as you cleanse your body and your spirit anyway. And just let that stuff go down the drain, okay? take a bath, an Epsom salt bath. And as you're removing those toxins from your body, remove the toxins from your mind. Okay? Nadine said, I'm going to write a letter to my inner child. That is the most therapeutic way for me. So I have an inner child notebook, and that some of it I can't even read when she writes back to me with my non-dominant hand, but it doesn't matter. My spirit's getting out what my spirit needs to get out, right? Jonathan said, thank you so much. Thanks for a great live. I might just write a letter to my inner child. Jonathan, what'd you say? Might. I'm gonna need you to I'm gonna need you to go back and edit that out and say, I'm going to write my inner child a letter, because you're worth it. And your inner child is probably dying for that experience. Nadine said, can this be adapted for teenagers? Oh, most certainly. So how this came about for me personally was about 17 years ago. I started working with teenagers and juvenile offenders and runaway teens. And I would take them to therapy. And then after I would take them to therapy, a lot of times they'd have a doctor's appointment. And my kiddos would get so far in their healing journey, but they'd only get so far. And there was something missing from their treatment plans. And it was, now zooming back, it was because the root cause was missing. They would talk about what was going on today, but they wouldn't explore the yesterdays, 10 years ago or 12 years ago that got them to that place. So they'd only get so far because they never healed the root cause. Okay? So I sat down with my boss and I begged him. I'm like, can I do something to help them? Because they're giving up, because they're like, well, God, if therapy can't help me and medication can't help me, then what is wrong with me? And then all those inner child wounds came back of them not feeling worthy all over again. So then the therapy and everything kind of wasn't really helping at all, because everything was coming right back. So my boss said, do whatever you have to do as long as it's legal. So I would sit my girls down at the kitchen table and we would get out journals. And I would ask them really deep questions, like super deep questions about their childhood. And I didn't need to read them. No one needed to read them. And as they got this stuff out, the tears would flow and their growth was insane. It's because they had no idea that that stuff was even in there. And then we started to incorporate the mirror, okay? And I would have the girls, and then the teenage boys started doing it with me, and I couldn't believe their results. I couldn't believe it. I would have them say out loud the first thing that came to their self as they looked at their eyes. And it was heartbreaking. I'm ugly. I'm fat. I'm not athletic enough. I don't look like so-and-so. My acne makes me look like this. I'm too dark. The words that would come out of their mouth. If it's coming out of their mouth, when they look at themselves, it's coming out of their actions. It's coming out of what they're craving. It's coming out of the relationships they're attracting. It's coming out every day. So when they would say those things and get them out, they became aware that they were in there. Do you get what I'm saying? A lot of times what happens is you're not even aware it's in there. So then they would do the work of writing their self letters, like Jonathan admitted he's going to now do. I got you, Jonathan. So it's like writing yourself the letters. Then they started realizing, oh my gosh, what I was longing for was this. And now how can I give myself that affection? How can I give myself that praise? So if anyone needs to do it, for sure, it's a teenager. A teenager, oftentimes, without meaning to, becomes their parents' biggest trigger. Because a lot of us as teenagers, we're going through a lot of stuff, a lot of emotions, and a lot of things that also. So then what happens is, we kind of just suppress them and we move on about our life. But then when we become a parent to a teenager, all that shit comes back. And we start being triggered by the teenager without even realizing it because all that shit is still in there. So if you can teach your teenager how to do inner child work now, okay, then you are saving that teenager years of therapy when they become an adult because they're dealing with the situation now instead of the situation dealing with them later. So it's having time as a family that you talk about things and not take them personal and giving them that safe place to go. It's having time as a family that you make the time to do meditations, even if it's only 5 minutes a night. If you have an Alexa app, honey, Alexa has phenomenal guided meditations. It's doing journal time as a family or writing down things and burning them in a fire ceremony of things that are no longer releasing you. But more importantly, it's giving them that space to go. Oftentimes as parents, we take it very personal. We think that if the kid's being a little shit that day or being cold or rude, that it's because they're mad at you. But think of the pressure that a kid is going through in today's society. We actually had it a lot easier than them. Very few kids now have an opportunity to have human connection, okay? Let alone having human praise. It's all through a screen, okay? So they have so much pressure nowadays. And if you had that pressure and you are still feeling it as an adult, think of what they're going through. It's not always about you. And when we take everything as all about us, that's a huge sign that we're still living as our inner child because we're still operating from that egocentric stage. We're not operating from the stage of awareness. So if you can give your child the gift of awareness, of course they're going to throw a fit and roll their eyes at you. Now, of course, shit, I would too. But they're listening. They're always listening. So I love this. Mary said, you can putty the cracks in a wall over and over. Girl, this is so good, honey. But they're gonna keep coming back if you do not fix the foundation issues. I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. 100%. I just want to make sure that I did not miss any comments. Jody said, writing a letter to my inner child, therapeutic. I love it. Perfect. It's amazing, you guys. It's amazing. Another fun thing I like to do is also run in the grass barefoot because I'm grounding and being a kid. So I'll wrap this up because I'm starting to go over my time. But Nadine said, you are such a gift to the world. Thank you, Leah. Thank you. I think the same of you. Nadine said, I told one of the young people I work with how stylish he was, and he was so overwhelmed with happiness to receive a compliment. Yes! There's a beauty of teenagers because even though they seem like they're stubborn and they're hard-headed, a teenager just desperately wants to be accepted. I mean, that's the bottom line. So if you talk to the teenager, even if they're acting like they don't hear it, okay? As I know my 17-year-old is listening to me in the background right now. They hear it. And once they feel that acceptance, their whole world changes. That's getting back to that. So once my kids in that teenage environment, when I was working with them, they started feeling accepted, but more importantly, accepted by themselves and being able to understand where these things were coming from within themselves, everything changed. So I started also incorporating this. I started working with people who lost custody of their children. And I would help them be able to get the skills and the mindset to get their kids back. And almost all of them, the reason that the abuse started with them abusing their kids was because they were triggered by those children. But more importantly, they were ages because they hadn't dealt with the inner child that they were still stuck in as a kid. And so when they would see this little kid act out and they weren't allowed to do that, or see this little kid be ungrateful and they were never allowed to be ungrateful, it would trigger something in them that they couldn't control. And it's because that part of them was still controlling their life. So what I invite you to do is to take time to write you a letter and come back. You don't have to share the letter, Jonathan. You don't have to share the letter, but come back and put in the comments how you felt. Did you feel free? Did you feel heard? Did you feel loved? Come back and share. I took myself on a inner child date today, and I went and had a Nerf gun war, or I went mini golfing, and I felt like I laughed for the first time in 3 years. Just share those moments, because then what you do is you start to see that this is actually something really great, and it's not something that you need to fear. So I can't wait to see what doors open for you by opening the door for your own inner child. And thank you guys for spending this hour with me, and have a fantastic day. And Nadine, thank you for such an amazing group and allowing us to literally, like you said, emerge from our warrior state. You guys got this. Oh, Jonathan, you got a gold star. All right, guys, have a great one.